And to have a senator from Maryland who didn't even acknowledge or barely acknowledged my daughter and the brutal death that she endured, to fly to El Salvador to bring back someone that's not even an American citizen. Why does that person have more right than I do, or my daughter?
These were the chilling words of Patty Morin, the heartbroken mother of a murdered young woman, brutally raped and killed by an undocumented immigrant. While she pleads for justice, her own senator flies thousands of miles, not to meet her, but to comfort someone else. A man held in a notorious El Salvador prison, a man with 0 confirmed crimes on record. And the backlash? It's just beginning. What you're about to see is one of the most explosive political debates of the year. A U.S. senator travels to meet a mistakenly deported man, while victims' families back home are ignored. Subscribe now for more fearless breakdowns you won't get anywhere else. This firestorm ignited when Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen made a surprise trip to El Salvador. But he wasn't just sightseeing. He went to meet Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Maryland resident who had been mistakenly deported by the Trump administration. Garcia was being held in one of El Salvador's most brutal maximum security prisons. According to the panel, Van Hollen's visit was meant to restore hope and accountability. One commentator said,
up and do something about it. So yes, going directly to El Salvador, making sure that he laid eyes on a resident, someone, his constituent, frankly made me feel better that if I get disappeared, somebody's going to try to find me and figure out.
It was a symbolic move, but was it also a political misfire? Supporters of Van Hollen quickly tried to justify his trip.
I can tell you we're certainly feeling around the state this enthusiasm that someone in power is actually trying to do something to check the imbalance in power. They can do things. Congress this is the Article 1 of the Constitution.
But is this a little like the Senator Booker sort of standing up and giving a speech? Is it about the image? Because it doesn't actually do something.
Well, what it does is that it gets the attention of a group of people right now who feel like they are leaderless. Right, so there's a large swath of the country that is Democrat. There's a large swath that is uncommitted. 90 million people did not vote. They are all at this moment waiting for somebody to directly challenge individual actions of Trump. Doesn't mean you need to be the next president candidate of the United States, but this idea that if you have power right now, this is an opportunity to step.
They framed his actions as a bold stand against an overreaching administration. But when pressed on what was actually accomplished, the defense began to crumble.
Sort of standing up and giving a speech, is it about the image?
Even his defenders had to admit, this might have been more about optics than outcomes. The anger didn't take long to surface. Patty Morin, the grieving mother, dropped the emotional hammer.
And to have a senator from Maryland who didn't even acknowledge or barely acknowledged my daughter and the brutal death that she endured, to fly to El Salvador to bring back someone that...
She wasn't alone in her fury. Tiffany Smiley, a former Republican Senate candidate, didn't mince words.
And President Trump came in on a commitment, promises made and promises kept, that he was going to secure the border, deport illegals, deport criminals who do not belong.
Now, here's the catch. The documents released didn't actually prove any of this. A fact check was quickly dropped into the conversation.
The government has not released any documented information around intelligence reports specifically, and right now the documents they did release this week.
Despite these facts, the messaging war was on. One speaker hit back hard at the spin.
The time, right? You're either for criminals, against victims, or you are for this bullying government that is just completely pillaging due.
Even Joe Rogan, not known for siding with the left, reportedly said,
It's like, hey, this was a mistake, that this shouldn't be happening.
So, let's get this straight. The Trump administration called the deportation of Garcia a mistake. The Supreme Court ordered his return. But the administration's response?
Judge, Well, I'm not involved in it. I'm going to respond by saying you'll have to speak to the lawyers.
He passed the buck, just as the optics turned explosive. Just when things couldn't get more explosive, the president himself stepped into the storm. Pressed on whether he would return Garcia to the U.S. and let him appear before a judge, Trump flatly said,
Judge? Well, I'm not involved in it. I'm going to respond by saying you'll have to speak to the lawyers, the DOJ. I've heard many things about him, and we'll have to find out.
"Wait, what? This was the same administration that deported him. Now they're unsure?" Even as the Supreme Court ordered his return, Trump's response was, "Talk to the lawyers." But that wasn't even the most jaw-dropping moment. Listen to Tiffany Smiley double down despite no concrete evidence.
There is intelligence reports that show that he was involved in human trafficking. He's a wife, that his wife.
None of that has actually been proven.
And then came the dagger from the host.
The government has not released any documented information around intelligence reports specifically, and right now the documents they did release this week.
The contradiction was deafening. They threw every accusation in the book at Garcia, but had nothing to back it up. This wasn't just a narrative collapse, it was a full meltdown. In the final stretch of this chaotic debate, the emotions peaked, and the hypocrisy was exposed. Smiley launched one last attack.
I want to make a point that a sitting senator never met with Patty, who has no justice. She lost her daughter, who was brutally raped and killed by an illegal immigrant, but yet gives deference and will fly to El Salvador to meet with an illegal immigrant. The optics of that are not great. I mean, you look at this from a whole messaging standpoint, and it makes sense why President.
But then, a moment of clarity pierced through. A final guest responded with something that shut it all down.
Garcia,
Right,
I want to make
correct.
sure,
Yes,
just
yeah.
because when you say it in a way that's really quick,
Yeah.
it makes it sound like he committed this crime, which he didn't,
No,
and
but
I just
think
don't want to
it's giving
make
Patty
that.
a voice.
Yeah.
She has no justice.
And she should have a voice.
But
And it is
does
a
she-
horrible case, but it's
Yeah.
also with her senator and her constituents. Like, we're blurring the lines of how power and authority.
And the final line?
When you are the Maryland senator, you are going to be concerned about what happens to residents and legal people living in Maryland.
Boom! It wasn't about ignoring victims. It was about serving constituents. But somewhere between the tragedy of Patty's daughter and the politics of Garcia's deportation, everything got weaponized. What we witnessed wasn't just a clash over immigration. It was a moral crossroads. A grieving mother denied justice, a Maryland man exiled by mistake, and a government too busy pointing fingers to follow the court's order. In this twisted political theater, truth got trampled, and the people were left behind. A sitting U.S. senator flew across borders to find a constituent in a foreign prison, while his colleagues back home weaponized tragedy to score political points. And the president? Talk to the lawyers. You cannot make this up. Subscribe now if you're tired of the spin and ready for truth without apology. This story is far from over.